On the Monday I took command, the gate I would spend the rest of my life thinking about was a small gray shape at the far end of the installation, half a mile from where I stood, close enough to see and too far to hear. I stood at attention on the quarterdeck at 7:55 in the morning in my service dress blue, 4 gold stripes on each sleeve, and I watched morning colors go up the pole, and I let my eyes travel down the long straight road to that gate exactly once, the way you let yourself look at an old scar in the mirror, and then I brought them back where they belonged. 3 days earlier, a young man at that gate had decided he knew exactly who I was in the time it took me to roll down a car window. I want to tell it plainly because the plain version is the true one, and the dramatic version does everyone a disservice, including the young man. It was the Thursday before the change of command. It was 16:40 in the afternoon, which is to say it was the worst possible hour to arrive at any military installation on the planet. The hour when the day shift pours out through the gates in a long, idling river of brake lights, and the sentries are tired, and the line never ends. I had planned it badly. I had driven 11 hours from the last place the Navy had kept me, in a rental sedan, the color of dishwater, with everything I would need for the first week folded into 2 bags in the trunk and a manila folder of orders riding shotgun on the passenger seat. I was not in uniform. That matters, so I will say it clearly. Officers report aboard in civilian clothes all the time, especially when they are driving cross-country and checking in a day early to walk the ground before the ceremony, and I was wearing what you wear on the 11th hour of a drive, which is to say gray trousers and a plain navy quarter zip and no makeup to speak of, and my hair down, because a bun after 11 hours is its own small cruelty. I am also, and this is simply a fact about me, a small woman, 5 feet and 3 inches on a generous day. I have a face that has been described, kindly and unkindly, as young for my rank, which is a thing people say as though I arranged it on purpose to inconvenience them. So there is the picture. A small, tired woman with her hair down, in a cheap rental, in the visitor lane, at the worst hour of the day. I had chosen to come a day early, precisely so that I could do this part quietly. A change of command is a public thing, all bands and folding chairs and dress uniforms, and there is nothing wrong with the ceremony. But I have never trusted an officer who only ever meets her command on the day of the ceremony. I wanted to walk the ground first. I wanted to drive the perimeter road at dusk and see where the lights were burned out. I wanted to stand in the galley and eat what the sailors eat and see the gate at the worst hour, which is the hour I was, as it happened, currently sitting in. You learn more about a command in 1 bad hour at the gate than in a week of briefings, because the briefings are what a command says about itself, and the gate is what a command actually is when it thinks the captain is not looking. On that Thursday, the captain was looking. The captain was in the 3rd car, back in the visitor lane, and no one knew it, which is the only condition under which you ever see the truth of anything. The master-at-arms who came to my window was young, and he was enjoying himself, which is a combination the watch does not always survive. He leaned down with one forearm on the roof of my car, close to the glass, and he looked in at me and at the folder on the seat and the coffee cups in the console. And I watched him build his little theory of me, the way you watch someone assemble a chair from a diagram, confident and slightly wrong at every step. "Need help, little lady?" he said. "You look a little lost." He glanced back over his shoulder at the sentry in the booth, a younger one, and there was a grin passing between them that I was clearly meant to be outside of. "Visitor parking's back the way you came. This lane's for folks with business on the installation." I have been called little lady before. I have been called sweetheart and honey and darlin', and once, memorably, by a harbor pilot who did not know my radio was keyed. A word I will not repeat because I do not repeat those words, even when other people hand them to me. I have made a study, across 23 years, of what to do with the small word when it arrives. And the study has produced exactly one finding, which is that you cannot give the word back. It has already been said. The other people at the gate have already heard it. And they have already begun, without meaning to arrange themselves around the version of you that the word describes. So you do not give it back. You hold your card out the window and you let the machine do the arithmetic that the man declined to do. "I have business," I said. That was all. I held out my common access card between 2 fingers. He took it the way you take a thing from someone you are indulging. He did not look at it. He was still half turned toward the booth, still finishing the grin, playing to the small crowd of one that a young man on a tired watch will always find. "Tell you what," he said, tapping my card against his other hand without reading it. "Let's get you turned around before you back up the whole line. You got a sponsor on base? Somebody expecting you." Behind me, the river of brake lights idled and glowed. Somebody, 4 cars back, tapped a horn once, not angry, just tired, and the sound of it seemed to remind the young man that he was standing at a window instead of running a line, and he finally, almost as an afterthought, turned my card over and lifted his scanner and ran it, still smiling, to make his point. I watched the smile. Here's who was actually in the car, since the young man did not ask and the machine was about to tell him anyway. My name is Camille Ashford. On that Thursday, I was 3 days from taking command of the entire installation whose gate I was sitting at, which is a sentence I could not have said out loud without it sounding like a boast, so I did not say it out loud. I said, "I have business," which was true, and I let the truth stay small in my mouth where it could not embarrass anyone. I was 45 years old. I had been commissioned an ensign at 22, which meant I had been wearing some version of this uniform for more than half my life, long enough that the person underneath the uniform and the uniform had stopped being separable in any way I could explain to a civilian. I was a surface warfare officer. I had stood watches on the bridges of ships in weather that would have impressed the young man at the gate a great deal more than my card did, and I had spent 2 years in command of a guided missile destroyer, 320 souls and 9,000 tons of steel, in waters where the margin between a good decision and a memorial service is about 90 seconds wide. I had been promoted to captain, the Navy kind, the 06 kind, the 4 gold stripes kind, 3 years earlier. And I had been ordered here, to this installation, to be its commanding officer, which is the closest thing the shore establishment has to owning the ground under your feet. None of that was visible through a car window. That is the entire point, and it is a point I had made my peace with so long ago that the young man's mistake did not even reach the part of me that could be wounded by it. The wound, if there was going to be one, was going to be his. I could give you the whole resume if you wanted it, but a resume is a strange, flat thing that leaves out everything that actually happened. It would tell you I qualified as a surface warfare officer in 2006, and it would not tell you about the 16 straight nights I stood on a darkened bridge, learning the difference between a fishing boat and a threat by the shape of a light on a black horizon. It would tell you I made lieutenant commander and department head, and it would not tell you about the sailor I lost overboard in a following sea, and the letter I wrote his mother, and the fact that I can still recite that letter from memory 9 years later, because some things you write once and carry forever. It would tell you I took command of a destroyer in 2018, and it would not tell you what it is to have 320 people asleep in steel around you and to be the one awake mind deciding, at 0300, in a straight too narrow for the traffic in it, whether the closing contact is going to alter course or whether you are. The resume is the arithmetic. The life is the weather, and there is no line on any card for the weather. The young man at my window could not have known any of that, and I did not hold it against him that he could not. What I held against the moment, in the small, tired way you hold things when you are too disciplined to say them, was only this: that a person can carry all of that weather, every ounce of it, and still be reduced, at a gate at 1640 on a Thursday, to little lady. Not because of anything they did. Because of the size of them, and the softness of a face, and the color of a rental car. The weather does not show. It never shows. You would think, after 23 years, I would have stopped expecting it to. But I want to be honest about the tiredness, because the tiredness is the part that people who have never lived it get wrong. It was not the single moment that was heavy. A single little lady is nothing. I have been called worse by better. It was the accumulation. It was the fact that I could feel, sitting there, the whole long history of my own gates rising up behind the moment, like water behind a dam, every airman and receptionist and desk clerk and harbor pilot who had done the arithmetic on me and gotten it wrong. And I was tired in the specific way you get tired of being a math problem that strangers keep setting up incorrectly. It is not that any one of them matters. It is that all of them together weigh something, and you carry the weight into every new gate, whether you want to or not. And the weight was in the car with me on the passenger seat, next to the folder, and the young man could not see it any more than he could see the folder. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel. I did not correct him. I want to be clear that this was not saintliness. It was discipline, which is a colder and more reliable thing than virtue. And it is the only kind of restraint I actually trust. A person who does not react because they are good will eventually meet a morning where they do not feel good, and then they will react. A person who does not react because they have trained themselves not to will hold in weather that would break the other kind. I had trained myself for 23 years. I could sit at a window and be called little lady by a child in a uniform I had worn since before he could read. And I could keep my hands at 10 and 2. And I could let the machine do the talking because I had learned the hard way. At a gate very much like this one, that my temper was the one weapon on the installation that would only ever wound me. I had learned that from a man named Hollis Vetter, and I had learned it a long time ago. And the young man scanning my card was about to become, without ever knowing it, the final exam of a lesson that had started before he was born. The first gate was in 2004. I was an ensign, so new that my gold bars still had the hard shine on them that wears off after a season of salt air. And I had been aboard my first ship for all of 6 weeks. It was raining the particular way it rains in a Navy town, sideways and without conviction, and I had walked to the gate from the parking lot in a civilian rain jacket over my uniform because I had not yet learned the 1,000 small tricks of looking like what you are. The petty officer on watch that morning did not let me on. I had left my identification in my other coat, which was a genuinely stupid thing to have done, and which I have never done since. And when I told him I was Ensign Ashford, assigned to the ship tied up 200 yards behind him, he looked at me, a small, soaked 22-year-old with her hair plastered down, and he smiled the way the young man at my window would smile 22 years later, and he said, loud enough for the 2 sailors near the booth to hear, "Sure you are, sweetheart, and I'm the Admiral. Wives' orientation is Thursdays. You can wait over there out of the rain." The 2 sailors laughed, not cruelly. That is the thing I have spent 22 years trying to explain to people who want the villains to be villains. It is almost never cruelty. It is ease. It is the frictionless confidence of people who have never once had to wonder whether they belonged. And the laugh is not aimed at you so much as it is the sound their comfort makes. And it is somehow worse for not being aimed, because you cannot even be properly angry at it. I stood out of the rain where he pointed, and I waited. 22 years old and soaked and folded very small around the humiliation, until someone from the ship who knew my face walked down to vouch for me. That afternoon, Senior Chief Hollis Vetter found me on the quarterdeck. Vetter ran the ship's watch bill, and a good deal of the ship besides, in the way that a senior chief runs things, which is to say, invisibly and completely. He was a heavy, unhurried man with forearms like mooring lines and a voice he never once raised in the 2 years I knew him. He had heard about the gate, because senior chiefs hear about everything, and I braced for sympathy, which I did not want, or for a lecture about my identification, which I deserved. He gave me neither. He leaned on the rail beside me and looked out at the gray water for a while, and then he said, "You want to be angry at that kid at the gate." "I left my ID in my coat," I said. "It was my fault." "That is not what I asked you." He let that sit. "You want to be angry. That is fine. Be angry on your own time. But I am going to tell you something now, Ensign, and I want you to keep it because you are going to need it for the next 30 years. He tapped the rail once with 2 fingers. "The kid at the gate is the first word this command says to the world. Every single person who comes aboard, the first human being they meet, is a tired 20-year-old in a booth, and whatever that 20-year-old does becomes, for that person, what the whole command is. That is a terrible amount of power to hand a 20-year-old. But that is the job, and the watch has always worked that way, and it always will. So he should have believed me," I said, still angry, still 22. "Maybe," Vetter said, "but that is not the part I want you to keep. Here's the part." He turned and looked at me for the first time, and his eyes were not unkind, but they were not soft either. "Someday that gate is going to be yours. Some command, some gate, some tired kid in a booth. And on that day, you are going to remember standing in the rain, and you are going to want to fix the kid the way he fixed you. Do not fix him with your temper. Your temper will feel like justice, and it will only teach him to be afraid. Fix him with your standard. Teach him what the watch is for. That is the only repair that holds. I want to tell you one more thing about Vetter, because it is the thing that made the lesson stick where 100 louder lessons slid off. About a month after the rain, I watched him do the thing he had told me to do. A retired Master Chief came aboard for a ship's tour, an old man in a ball cap and a windbreaker, unannounced, the kind of visitor a busy quarterdeck brushes off without thinking. The petty officer of the watch that day very nearly brushed him off. And Vetter, who did not miss anything that happened on his quarterdeck, crossed the deck without appearing to hurry and greeted the old man by his rank, which he had read off nothing, which he simply knew the way he knew everything. And he gave that old man 20 minutes in the full courtesy of the ship, and when it was over he came back to the young petty officer of the watch, and he did not chew him out. He said quietly, "That was somebody's chief once. He is always somebody's chief. Now you know." And the young sailor stood a little straighter for the rest of the watch, and I understood, watching it, that I had just seen the standard I was going to spend the rest of my career trying to keep. I did not understand it, not all the way, not at 22. Understanding is a thing that arrives late, if it arrives at all, and usually you have to earn the understanding by failing the lesson a few times first. But I kept it. I kept it through the divisions and the deployments and the 2 years on the destroyer's bridge, and I kept it after Vetter retired and after the cancer took him in 2021, a year and a half before I made captain, so that he never got to see the stripes he had, in his quiet, invisible way, helped put on my sleeve. I kept his voice. And on a Thursday afternoon, in a rental sedan, with a young master-at-arms lifting his scanner to make his point, I heard that voice as clearly as if the heavy old man were leaning on the roof of my car. "Do not fix him with your temper." I was about to get the chance. The scanner made its small electronic sound, the one every one of us knows, the little chirp that means the machine has finished reading and has an opinion. The young man was still half turned toward the booth when it chirped. He glanced down at the screen out of habit, the way you glance at a thing you are certain about, expecting nothing. And then he stopped. I have watched a great many faces receive information they were not prepared for, on bridges and in wardrooms, and once across a table from a man I had to tell that his son's ship was overdue. And there is a particular stillness that comes over a face in the half-second before it decides what to do. It is not fear yet. Fear comes second. First, there's only the stillness of a mind that has hit a fact it cannot fit into the theory it built, and has to choose, very fast, between the theory and the fact. I watched that stillness arrive on the young man's face. His eyes moved across the screen once, quickly, and then they went back to the top and moved across it again, slowly. And the second time they moved, I watched the grin come off him, the way frost comes off a window when the sun finds it, not all at once, but completely. He straightened up. He took his forearm off the roof of my car. He looked at the screen a third time, and then he looked at me, and then he looked at the screen again, as though one of the two of us might have changed. "Ma'am," he said. The word came out different than little lady had. Little lady had been a thing he did to me. Ma'am was a thing that was happening to him. I did not help him. I want to be honest about that too. I did not say it is all right, and I did not say, don't worry about it. And I did not perform the gracious little absolution that a certain kind of senior officer performs in that moment precisely so that everyone can see how gracious they are. I sat with my hands at 10 and 2, and I let him read the screen, because the screen was going to teach him something in about 4 seconds that no amount of my talking could teach him, and I have learned not to interrupt a good teacher. I have thought since about how long that half-second actually was, the one where he read the screen the second time. In real time, it could not have been more than 2 or 3 seconds. But I have noticed that the moments that decide things are always experienced in a different kind of time, a slower and more spacious kind, the kind you get on a bridge in the 90 seconds before a collision that does or does not happen. In that stretched out time, I could see everything at once. I could see the line of cars in my mirror and the younger sentry easing out of the booth and the pennant on the sedan already turning off the main road, and I could see, most clearly of all, the young man's face making the oldest and most human decision there is, which is what to do with a fact that destroys a story you were enjoying. Some people fight the fact. Most people, in my experience, fight the fact. He did not. That is the detail I keep coming back to. He looked at the thing that unmade his afternoon, and he let it unmake his afternoon, and he did not reach for a single one of the lies that were right there for the taking. The screen, I found out later, when I had cause to look at exactly what the gate system shows, had returned my card with a flag on it. Not a warning flag, an arrival flag. When a commanding officer is inbound to an installation, the personnel system knows, and the access control system knows. And when that card crosses the reader, the machine does not simply say, "This person may enter." It says this person is the person whose name is about to go on the door of the building at the top of the road. It says notify the command duty officer. It says, in the flat language of a database, the small, tired woman you have been calling little lady for the last 90 seconds is, as of Saturday, the reason you have a job. The young man read all of that. I watched him read it. And to his credit, and I mean that word, to his actual credit, he did not try to talk his way out of it. He did not laugh it off or make a joke to the booth or reach for the easy lie that he had known all along. He did the one right thing available to him, which was to reach for the gate phone with a hand that was not quite steady and call it in. "Booth to CDO," he said, and his voice had dropped all the way down out of the register he had been using with me, down into the flat, careful register of a young man who understands that the next few minutes are going to matter for a long time. "Sir, I need the command duty officer at the main gate. Now please, it is about the incoming CO." There was a pause while the phone said something back to him. The line of cars idled. The younger sentry had come halfway out of the booth and was standing very still. The way you stand when you have realized that the thing going wrong is not going to be your thing, but you are close enough to it to catch the edge. "No, sir," the young man said into the phone. "She is here, at the gate. Right now, sir." Another pause. "Yes, sir. I understand, sir." He hung up the phone very gently, as though it might go off, and he came back to my window, and he stood there, and I watched him hold a position of attention that no one on earth had ordered him to hold. The card still in his hand, the card trembling just slightly, the whole confident afternoon he had been having gone out of him like air out of a slow tire. "Ma'am," he said again, "the command duty officer is on his way. I am." "Ma'am, I am sorry." A gray sedan with the station's blue pennant on the fender was already turning off the main road and coming down toward the gate, fast and behind it, walking, not running, but covering ground with the flat, unhurried economy of a woman who has been walking toward problems her whole career, came a khaki figure I would come to know very well, with the anchor and stars of a command master chief on her collar. The sedan stopped short of the gate, and a young lieutenant got out of it before it had entirely finished moving. He had the slightly wild look of a command duty officer who has just been told on an ordinary Thursday afternoon that the incoming commanding officer of the installation is currently sitting in the visitor lane, being processed like a lost tourist, which is the kind of sentence that ends careers if it is handled wrong and makes legends if it is handled worse. "Captain Ashford." He came to my window and rendered a salute that was a beat too sharp, the salute of a man overcorrecting for a service he has not yet done anything wrong in. "Sir, I am Lieutenant Castellano, the command duty officer. Sir, I apologize. This is... Sir, I do not have words for what this is. If you will follow me, I will get you aboard immediately, and I will personally see that." He stopped, and his eyes went past me to the young master-at-arms standing rigid at my other window, and I watched the lieutenant's face do the calculation that a certain kind of officer does, the calculation that ends in a name and a rate and a career held up in the air like a fish. "Petty officer, what is your name?" he said, and his voice had gone cold and formal, and he had already taken his notebook halfway out of his breast pocket. This was the moment. I want to slow down here, because everything that the story is actually about happens in the next 90 seconds, and it does not look like anything. There is no salute snapping across a room. There is no admiral's voice on a radio. There is only a small, tired woman in a rental car, a wild-eyed lieutenant with a notebook, a command master chief arriving on foot, and a 24-year-old at a car window who has just understood the size of his mistake and is standing at attention, waiting for the axe he is certain is coming. Everyone at that gate expected me to swing it. That is the part I need you to understand. The lieutenant expected it and had his notebook out to hold the handle for me. The younger sentry expected it and had gone pale in anticipation of watching it. And the young man himself expected it most of all, and had arranged his whole body into the posture of a person bracing to receive a blow, which is a posture I had seen once before, in a mirror, on a rainy morning in 2004, on a soaked 22-year-old who had just been told that wives' orientation was Thursdays. I could have ended him with one sentence. That is the truth of what rank is, the truth they do not put on the recruiting posters. I could have said relieve him of the watch, and the lieutenant would have written it down, and the young man would have spent the rest of a short career as the master-at-arms who called the incoming CO little lady. And every gate he ever stood after that, he would have stood afraid. I could have made him small. It would have felt for about a day like justice. I know exactly how good it would have felt, and I am not going to pretend otherwise because the officers who claim they are never tempted are either lying or are not paying attention, and I do not trust either kind. 23 years of little lady and sweetheart and wives' orientation is Thursdays had built a small, hard stone in me, the way it builds one in anyone who lives it. And the stone would have loved to be thrown. There is a version of me, a younger version, standing in a different reign, who would have thrown it. She would have called it accountability. She would have told herself she was defending every woman who would ever drive up to that gate after her, that making an example of one careless boy was a service to all the small, tired women coming behind. And she would have been wrong, and the wrongness is subtle, so let me say it plainly. You do not make a gate safer for the next small woman by teaching the watchstander to fear the wrong car. You make it safer by teaching him to see every car. Fear narrows a man. It makes him careful about exactly one thing, the thing that burned him, and careless about everything else. I did not need Marchetti careful about captains. I needed him awake to people. Those are not the same lesson, and only one of them survives the week, so the stone stayed where it was. It is still there. I do not think it ever fully goes away, and I have stopped expecting it to. You just learn, over a career, whose hand it is safe to put it in, and the answer, it turns out, is almost never a 24-year-old's. The command master chief reached the gate then. She came up beside the lieutenant, and she took in the whole tableau in one long, unhurried look, the car, the folder on the seat, the young man at attention, the lieutenant with his notebook out, me with my hands still at 10 and 2, and she did not say anything at all. She just looked at me, and there was a question in the look, an old question, the oldest question the enlisted force asks of a new captain without ever saying it out loud. It is a simple question, and everything depends on the answer. I had seen that question asked before, from the other side of it, when I was the tired enlisted watchstander and a new captain was arriving and everyone in the division was quietly waiting to learn what we had been handed. The wardroom does not tell you what kind of officer someone is. The plaques do not tell you. The first time you actually learn it is a moment exactly like this one. An unplanned moment, a moment with a young sailor's career sitting on the table like a dropped glass. And everyone watching to see whether the new captain reaches for a broom or a hammer. The enlisted force has been reading officers this way since before there were engines and ships. They are very good at it. Command Master Chief Pierce had been reading officers this way for close to 30 years, and she stood at my window and waited, and gave me nothing to read from her, and let the question hang there in the cold air off the water. The question is, what kind of officer are you? I turned off the car. I have thought a great deal, since, about why that was the thing I did first, and I believe it is because turning off the engine is the smallest possible way of saying I am not in a hurry to get away from this, I am going to stay in it, and staying in it was the whole decision. Then I opened the door and I got out and I stood up to my unimpressive full height in my civilian clothes with my hair down and the wind off the water, and I was, I promise you, the shortest person at that gate. And it did not matter even slightly, because rank is not a thing you wear on your body, it is a thing you carry in the space around you, and I had been carrying it for 23 years, and I knew exactly how much room it took up. "Lieutenant," I said, "put your notebook away." He did. He did it the way you do a thing when a voice you have just met has already found the place in you that obeys. "Petty officer," I said, and I looked at the young man, and I let him see that I was looking at him as a person and not as a problem. "What is your name?" "Marchetti, ma'am," he said. "Master-at-Arms, Second Class Marchetti. Cole Marchetti." "Petty Officer Marchetti," I said. "Look at me for a second, not at attention, just look at me." He did, and his eyes were the eyes of a young man who has already written the end of his own story and is waiting only for someone to read it back to him. "You are not relieved of the watch," I said. You are not going to be. Do you understand me? I watched that fail to compute, the same way the arrival flag had failed to compute on his screen. Ma'am, he said, I called you. I know what you called me. I do not understand why I am not. Because you stopped a car you did not recognize at a gate you are responsible for, I said, which is the entire job, and you did it badly, which is a different problem, and it is a problem I can fix, and I intend to. But I am not going to teach you how to stand a watch by taking your watch away. That would teach you to be afraid of the gate. I need you unafraid of the gate. I need you to be the best word this command says to the world, and you cannot be the best word if you are standing there terrified of the next car. I glanced at the line, still idling, still patient in the way tired people are patient. Right now you have 12 cars backed up because we are having a conversation. Get Petty Officer Ballou back in the booth. Get this line moving. Check me in properly. And on Monday morning, after the change of command, you and I are going to have 5 minutes, and it is not going to be the 5 minutes you are dreading. That is an order, Petty Officer. The order is, keep standing your watch. He stood there for one more second, and then something went across his face that I did not have a name for at the time, but have thought about often since. And I believe now that it was the specific disorientation of a young person who has braced for a punishment and received an expectation instead, which is a heavier thing to carry and a better one. Hi, ma'am, he said, and his voice was steadier than it had been since the scanner chirped. He handed me my card back with both hands, which no one had taught him to do, which he did because the moment seemed to call for a care he did not have any other way to show. Welcome aboard, Captain. I got back in the rental. The gate arm went up. Lieutenant Castellano tried to insist on escorting me, and I let him lead in the gray sedan because it was easier than arguing. And as I rolled through the gate and onto the installation that would be mine in 72 hours, I looked once in the rearview mirror and I saw a young man turning back to the line of cars, straightening his cover, leaning down to the next window, and I saw the Command Master Chief watching him and then watching me go, with an expression I could not read at that distance, but chose, hopefully, to believe was the beginning of an answer to her question. The change of command was on Saturday morning, but the story does not turn on Saturday. It turns on Monday, which is why I began there, standing on the quarterdeck watching the gate. Let me give you Saturday quickly, because it is the part everyone thinks is the important part, and it is not. On Saturday morning, the installation mustered on the parade deck in dress uniform. Hundreds of sailors in ranks, the band, the folding chairs full of civilians and retirees, and the families who come to these things. I stood on the platform in my service dress blue with the 4 gold stripes catching the light. And Rear Admiral Grady Whitlock, the region commander, read the orders in the old formal language that has not changed in a very long time. To Captain Camille Ashford, he read, you are hereby ordered to assume command. I saluted. I said the words you say. I read my orders aloud to the assembled command, which is the moment the authority actually transfers, an old ritual conducted in plain public sight so that no one can ever say they did not know who was in charge. And then I turned and faced several hundred people who now worked for me, and I gave a short speech, because long speeches at a change of command are a form of theft, and I did not mention the gate, and I did not mention any young man by name, and I did not tell the story I am telling you now. There's a thing that happens to your body when you read your own orders aloud to a command, and I did not expect it the first time, and it has not stopped happening since. The words are old and dry and formal, and you have heard them read at a dozen other people's ceremonies, and then you are the one saying them. And somewhere in the middle of the second sentence, the dryness burns off, and you feel the actual weight of the thing settle onto your shoulders, like a coat someone has draped there from behind. I assume command. 2 words. Everyone who has ever said them means them differently and means them the same. I said them, and I felt the coat settle, and I thought, absurdly, of Vetter, and of a soaked ensign in the rain, and of the long, strange, unlikely road from that gate to this platform, and I kept my face still, because a change of command is not the place for whatever was moving behind it. But I will tell you what I saw from the platform. Providing security for the ceremony, posted at the edge of the parade deck in his dress uniform, standing his watch, was Master-at-Arms, 2nd Class Cole Marchetti. And at the exact moment Admiral Whitlock read my name, I watched Marchetti's eyes come to me on the platform, and I watched him understand, all the way down, the full shape of the woman he had waved toward visitor parking on Thursday afternoon. I watched the whole size of it land on him at once, in public, with the band playing, and I watched him keep his bearing, keep his post, not flinch, and I thought, that is a young man who is going to be all right. I did not use the podium to name him. This is the thing I most want you to hear. I had, in that moment, the largest possible audience I would ever have on this installation. And the young man who had humiliated me was standing 40 feet away in plain view, and I could have made an example of him with a single sentence dropped sideways into my remarks, a little joke about being welcomed to my new command. And everyone would have laughed and glanced at the gate detail and known exactly who I meant. It would have cost me nothing. It would have cost him everything. That is precisely why I did not do it. Recognition that has to step on someone to be felt is not recognition. It is just a smaller cruelty wearing the uniform of a larger dignity, and I have never had any use for it. My eyes found the gate detail once, the way they had found the gate itself. And then, exactly as I had done on the quarterdeck, I brought them back where they belonged, and I finished my remarks and I took the watch. The way base stories travel is a thing unto itself. No one announces them. There is no all-hands email. And yet, by Monday morning, every soul on the installation knew some version of what had happened at the main gate on Thursday afternoon, and the versions were, as they always are, both more and less than the truth. In some versions, I had reduced the young man to tears. In some versions, I had a photographic memory and had already put him on report. In one version, which I heard secondhand and enjoyed more than I should have, I had gotten out of the car and done 50 push-ups to prove a point, which did not happen and would not have proven anything, except that I do not do 50 push-ups anymore. So when I called Petty Officer Marchetti to my office on Monday, after colors, he arrived at the version of the meeting that the base had written for him, which is to say he arrived braced. He knocked, and he came in, and he stood at attention in front of my desk with the particular rigidity of a young man who has spent a weekend rehearsing his own execution and would, at this point, almost prefer to get it over with. I let him stand there for a moment. Then I said, "At ease, Petty Officer. Sit down." He sat on the edge of the chair, the way you sit when you are not convinced the chair is really being offered. "I told you we would have 5 minutes," I said. "Here they are. I'm not going to spend them making you feel small, because you already feel small. And a person who already feels small does not learn anything. They just wait for the feeling to stop. So I am going to tell you the thing my senior chief told me at a gate a long time ago. And then you are going to go back to work, and we are going to be finished with Thursday. All right?" "Aye, ma'am," he said. "You were not wrong to stop me," I said. "I want to start there, because I think you have spent the weekend believing you were, and you were not. You saw a car you did not recognize in a lane it should not have been in, and you engaged it. That is the job. If you let every car through that gate because the driver looked harmless, you would be useless to me and worse than useless to the people who depend on that gate to mean something. So the stopping was right. Do you understand the difference I am drawing?" "I think so, ma'am." "You were not wrong to stop me. You were wrong about why you stopped me." I leaned forward. "You did not stop a car. You stopped a little lady. You decided who I was before I said a word, and then you ran your watch off the decision instead of off the facts, and the only reason you found out you were wrong is that the machine happened to tell you. That is the part we are fixing. Not the stopping, the deciding. Every single car at that gate is somebody. It is somebody's chief, somebody's daughter, somebody's admiral, somebody's brand new ensign standing in the rain, with no idea yet what she is going to become. You do not get to know which one is in the car. So you treat all of them like the first word this command says to the world, because for that person, at that moment, you are the entire Navy. That is not a courtesy. That is the watch. Do you understand me?" He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "On Thursday, when you did not relieve me, I did not understand it. I thought maybe you forgot to, or you were saving it. I sat with it all weekend." He looked at me. "You could have. Everybody thought you would. I thought you would." "I know," I said. "Why didn't you?" "Because a long time ago, a man could have made me afraid of a gate," I said. "And instead, he made me responsible for one. I have never forgotten the difference. I am not going to be the person who does the other thing to you. I stood up, which is how you tell a young man the 5 minutes are over without making him watch a clock. Go stand your watch, petty officer. Stand it like all three of them are in the car. Your chief, your daughter, your admiral, every time. He stood, and he came to attention, and the salute he gave me was not the overcorrected thing the lieutenant had given me at the gate. It was just correct. Aye, Captain, he said, and he left. And Command Master Chief Yolanda Pierce, who had been standing quietly in the corner of my office, through the whole of it because she had asked to be there, and I had said yes, waited until the door closed, and then said the only thing she said about any of it. That will hold, she said. It was the same word Vetter had used across 22 years as an ocean of difference, and I do not think she knew that. And I did not tell her, but I heard it, and it was the closest thing to a benediction I have ever received on a Monday. Admiral Whitlock called me that afternoon. He had heard the gate story, of course, because a region commander hears everything a command master chief hears, and then some, and I braced a little because senior officers sometimes want a pound of someone else's flesh on your behalf, as a courtesy, as a way of showing they take an insult to one of their captains seriously. He did not want a pound of anyone. He asked me what I had done about it, and I told him, plainly, the not relieving in the Monday 5 minutes, and there was a silence on the line, and then he said, You know, most people would have had that kid's stripe. I know, sir. My first CO would have had my whole hide for less, he said, and I spent about 10 years being a worse officer for it, standing every watch waiting to get caught at something. Took me a long time to figure out that being afraid of your command is not the same as respecting it. Another pause. Your senior chief teach you that? The one you talk about? I had not mentioned Vetter to him. I do not know how he knew there was a senior chief. I suppose there is always a senior chief behind every officer worth the stripes, and flag officers know to ask. Yes, sir, I said. He did. Good ones do, Whitlock said. All right, Camille, go run your base. And he hung up, and I sat there for a moment with the phone in my hand, thinking about the strange long relay race that a good lesson runs, passed from a hand that is gone into a hand that is here, still moving, still ahead of the pack. The runner who started it, long since off the track, and the baton somehow still going. I want to be honest about the cost because a story like this can lie by leaving things out, and the thing it would leave out is the ache. That Monday night I stayed late in the office, the way you do on the first days of a command, when the building is finally quiet and yours, and you can walk through it without anyone standing up. I sat down in the chair behind the desk, my chair now, and I opened the bottom drawer where I had put a few things that first day that I do not put anywhere anyone can see. And I took out a small piece of metal and set it on the desk in front of me. It was a senior chief's collar device. An anchor with a single silver star, worn soft at the edges from a large thumb that had rubbed it over the years, the way some men worry a coin. It had been Hollis Vetter's. His wife had sent it to me after the funeral, in a padded envelope with a note that said he would have wanted you to have this. He talked about you, and I had carried it through 2 commands and 3 moves, and I kept it in the drawer of every desk I have ever sat behind. And I take it out on the nights that need taking out. The ache is this. Everything good that happened at that gate came from a man who was not alive to see any of it. The lesson I gave Marchetti was Vetter's lesson. The restraint that kept me from swinging the axe was Vetter's restraint. The whole reason a young man is going to stand a better watch for the next 30 years traces back, if you follow the thread all the way down, to a heavy, unhurried senior chief leaning on a rail in the rain in 2004. And that senior chief died in 2021, a year and a half before I made captain, and he never saw the stripes, and he never saw a command of mine, and he will never know that the thing he said on the quarterdeck to a soaked and furious ensign went on working for 22 years, and closed a circle at a gate he never stood at, on an installation he never saw, for a young man he never met. Being right is not the same as being whole. I have made captain, and I have taken a command, and I have, I think, become more or less the officer that Vetter told me I could be. And there is still a drawer, in every office I sit in, with a piece of an old man's collar in it, because the one person whose recognition I actually wanted is the one person who is not here to give it. That is the arithmetic that does not come out even. That is the sum that no machine at any gate will ever scan and flag and hand back to me. There's a photograph I did not take out that night, though I thought about it, of Vetter at his retirement, heavy and grinning and a little embarrassed by the fuss. A young officer at his shoulder, who was me, though you would have to know to look. I did not take it out because there are nights the photograph is too much and the collar device is exactly enough. And that was one of them. The metal you can hold, the metal fits in a hand. A face in a photograph asks you to remember the whole man, and some nights you do not have the whole man in you. You only have the one thing he said on a rail in the rain. And that has to be enough, and it is. I think about what he would have made of the gate. He would not have made a speech of it. He would have listened to the whole thing with his arms crossed, and that flat, unhurried patience. And at the end he would have grunted, and he would have said something like, "Well, you finally listened," or he would have said nothing at all and just tapped the rail twice with 2 fingers, which was the highest praise he had, and which he spent about 4 times in 2 years. I would have given a good deal to have earned the 2 taps for this. I will not get to. That is the shape of it. You do the thing right, finally, decades later, and the one person who could tell you that you did is exactly the person who is not there. And the rightness has to be its own report card, graded by no one, filed nowhere. I sat with it for a while, the way you do. And then I set the anchor with its single silver star up on the desk in the corner where I can see it from the chair, and I left it there because some griefs are meant to be kept in a drawer and some are meant to be kept in the light. And I had decided that this one had earned the light. It is some weeks later now, as I tell you this, and the gate runs differently, and I would like to tell you that this is because of anything I did, but I think the truer thing is that it is because of what a young man decided to do with a Monday morning conversation. I pass the main gate most days. I have watched, without ever letting it look like watching, the way Master-at-Arms, second-class Marchetti, stands his post now. He is not softer. That is the thing people get wrong about this kind of story. They think the lesson is, be gentle, and it is not. He is, if anything, sharper, more awake, more genuinely present at the window of each car, because he has stopped running his watch off his assumptions and started running it off the facts, and the facts require more attention than the assumptions ever did. I have seen him turn away a car that needed turning away with a courtesy that gave the driver nothing to be angry about and left no doubt about the answer. And one morning I saw him lean down to a small, tired woman in a cheap car, a young spouse by the look of her, new to the base, lost, exactly the kind of person he had decided I was, and I saw him say something to her that made her shoulders come down out of her ears, and I saw him point the way with the whole flat of his hand, the way you do when you actually want someone to find the place. And I had to look away, because it is a strange and undoing thing to watch a person hand another person the exact courtesy that was withheld from you, and mean it. I made one change to the way the gate runs, and it is the only order I gave that came directly out of that Thursday, and I gave it to the whole security department through Command Master Chief Pierce so that it would not look like it was aimed at one young man, because it was not. The change was small. I asked that every watchstander at every gate, at the turnover of every shift, say one sentence out loud to the sailor relieving them. The sentence is, "You do not know who is in the car." That is all. Some of them thought it was strange at first, I am told, the way sailors think any new thing is strange, until it becomes the way it has always been done. But a sentence said out loud at every turnover becomes a habit, and a habit becomes a standard, and a standard becomes the character of a place. And I would rather build the character of a place, one plain sentence at a time, than one loud punishment at a time. Because the punishments are forgotten by the next duty section, and the sentences are still being said after the captain who started them is 3 commands gone. Pierce told me, a few weeks in, that she had heard a brand new sailor, barely out of training, say the sentence to an older petty officer as a joke, sing-song, the way the young rib the traditions they have not yet earned. And she told me the older petty officer did not laugh. He said, "Yeah, and I know a story about that," and he told the new kid the story of a Thursday afternoon in a rental car, and the new kid stopped laughing. That is how a thing gets into the blood of a command. Not from the top. From a petty officer telling a story to a newer sailor at a gate at the worst hour of the day, and meaning it. Marchetti and I do not talk about Thursday. There is nothing left to say about Thursday. But we have a thing now, a small thing, that passes between us when I go through the gate in the mornings, which is that he renders his salute, and I return it, and, some mornings, there is the very smallest nod on top of it. From him to me, and from me to him. And the nod does not mean welcome aboard anymore. I do not know exactly what it means. I think it means something like we both know. I think it means the watch is good. I think it means a heavy old man's voice is still working. 22 years and one more gate down the line, in a young man who will never know his name. The last thing I will tell you about the gate is that I do not need to stand at it. That is how you know a standard has actually taken hold instead of a fear. A fear needs you standing over it. A standard runs on its own, in the dark, at the worst hour of the day, when the line never ends and the CO is nowhere in sight. And the young man at the window treats the next tired stranger like the first word the command says to the world, not because anyone is watching, but because that is simply what the watch is now. The gate arm goes up for someone I will never meet, and it goes up right, and I am half a mile away not thinking about it, which is the whole victory, and it does not look like a victory at all, which is how I know it is a real one. I have told you this because I suspect some of you know the exact weather of it. You have been measured and filed in a single glance. You have been the answer to a math problem a stranger set up wrong. You have handed over your card, your resume, your credentials, your quiet, true self to someone who had already decided who you were before you spoke. And you have felt the specific tiredness of knowing that the correction will cost you more than the insult did. Here is the one thing I have after 23 years of gates. You do not owe them your anger. Your anger will feel like justice, and it will mostly just teach the world to handle you carefully, which is not the same as teaching the world to see you. What you owe, and you owe it only to yourself, is your standard. Be the number you actually are. Let the ones who miscount you do the work of correcting their own arithmetic, because it is their work, not yours, and stand your own watch so well that the people coming up behind you never have to stand in the rain, wondering whether they belong. And if you are ever the one in the booth, the one with the small, terrible power of being someone's first word, remember that you do not get to know who is in the car. So treat all of them like they are somebody's chief, somebody's daughter, somebody's admiral, because one of them will be. And the one who is will remember, for the rest of a long life, whether you were kind to her in the rain. Keep your dignity where no one can scan it. Stand your watch. That is the whole of it. The end.